Good morning again. We're in the 5th chapter of James now, the last chapter of this letter, which is all about the practical, all about what we can do with the lives that we've got and how we can use them to best effect. And James, as always, is pretty straight talking this week. So the passage says this: "Now listen, you rich people, weep and wail because of the misery that is coming upon you. Your wealth has rotted and moths have eaten your clothes. Your gold and silver are corroded. Their corrosion will testify against you and eat your flesh like fire. You have hoarded wealth in the last days. Look, the wages you failed to pay the workmen who mowed your fields are crying out against you. The cries of the harvesters have reached the ears of the Lord Almighty. You have lived on earth in luxury and self-indulgence. You have fattened yourselves in the day of slaughter. You have condemned and murdered innocent men who were not opposing you." Well, so James tells it like it is, as always, and the troubling and the worrying thing that should be troubling and worrying all of us who are living in this Western world, in this Western culture at this time, is we are the rich people. With a very, very few exceptions, we are the rich people. If we are the people who know that we've got somewhere safe to sleep tonight where we're not going to come to harm, if we've got enough food in our fridges and our cupboards to last us for a week, we are the rich people. And so this is directed, or could be directed, at us, and that is a serious matter. And it's and James, you know, says it seriously. He doesn't beat about the bush here. He says, you know, you've lived on earth in luxury and self-indulgence. Well, we probably have. You know, that's the reality. We probably have. So what do we do about it? Because, you know, even in James's day, there were rich people, and some of those rich people were followers of Jesus. And we know that some of those rich people were followers of Jesus because some of them financed his ministry. Rich people came to an understanding of who Jesus was and gave their lives to them. So it's not, it can't just be because you're rich that there's an issue, because I don't think that the rest of the Bible stacks up against that. And the reality is, you know, what do you want us to do? Do you want us to chuck everything we've got and go live homeless in the gutter? How do we try and tie the things together? The reality is that most of us who are in this Western world are rich, and yet we don't want to be the people who are responsible maybe for bringing around or bringing about the destruction of others. What do we do? Well, the thing is, I think that it boils down maybe to two things that wealth brings to us, that as wealthy people we have, that maybe people who are less well off than ourselves don't have. And it's what we do with those two things that I think is the most important thing. And the first thing that being rich brings is a sense of security, and an actual security. You know, in my life, we've had times in our life where we've been really, really seriously potless. And, you know, I've gone to the shops before to buy a week's shopping with 2p's and 1p's out of a jar because that's all I had years ago. But I've been there, and I've also been in a position where at the end of the month, I've got all this money left over, and I'm thinking, well, I'm getting paid again in a couple of days' time. What am I going to do with this money? And I know which one I would prefer to be. I would far prefer to be in the position where I've got money left over at the end of the month, thank you very much, because if you don't have security, if you don't have financial security, it is so wearing, it is tiring, it is hard living a life where you know that if you need to buy new school shoes, you don't know where they're coming from. Or you don't know how you're going to pay the rent. Or if the fridge breaks down, that's going to tip you over the edge into financial insecurity. That is a hard, hard place to live. And I don't genuinely think that Jesus wants us to live there either. I think Jesus wants us to have enough money to make sure that we can meet what our needs are. And that's demonstrated all over the Bible. Paul was an amazing evangelist, amazing missionary. He was also a tent maker. It's very clear that what he did was that he went and earned money enough to support his financial needs. I don't think Jesus is saying, I want you to be living in absolute poverty. I think Jesus wants us to be secure enough to meet our needs, but it's what we do with the rest of the money. Because the problem is that we can think that the more money we've got, the more secure we are going to be. And we can put all of our security into finance, and we can put all our security into the amount of cash that we've got in the bank. And we can trust in that to provide our security. But really, we know that that's not going to provide our security either, don't we? Because that doesn't stop the relationship breakdown that sends your world into a spiral. That doesn't stop the horrible diagnosis that you've just received from the doctors. That doesn't stop that phone call in the middle of the night. Our security should lie in far more than our money. And I think that's what James is getting at here. Yeah, sure, be financially secure enough to meet your needs. But don't put your security in your finances. Put your security in a God who loves you. So for us as Christians who would agree that we don't want to put our security in our finances, that we do want to put our security in a God that loves us, it leaves us with a serious and challenging question to ask ourselves. And that question is, what am I going to do with the money that's left over? When I'm in that position where I've met all my needs, not necessarily all my wants, where I've met all my needs this month, what am I going to do with the money that's left over? And maybe if we're serious about not ending up in the position that James warns us against, that's what we should be asking ourselves every single time we get paid. The other thing that I think that wealth brings to people, that wealthy people, rich people tend to have, that poor people don't tend to have, is influence. It's a sign in our society that we are a rich society, a privileged society, that we actually all within this society have the right to vote and have the right to have our voices heard and be influential in that way. But there are all sorts of other types of influence. And in general, it's the rich people that get their voices heard. They are the ones that are influential. But with that influence brings responsibility. And that responsibility lies again on our shoulders. So, how are we going to use our influence? Because I think it is down to us. A lot of people, I hear people say, oh, well, if there's a God in heaven, why are there so many people starving in the world? Listen, it's not God's fault that people are starving in the world. It is the fault of rich people with influence that people are starving in the world. Our gracious God has provided for all of his creation. And the figures are maybe even a couple of years out of date now. But they were something like there's around 6 billion people on the planet. And right now, at this moment, we produce enough food to feed 9 billion people. There is no shortage of food. What there is a shortage of righteous influence about how that food is distributed. This isn't God's fault. This is down to us to be influential. And where it worked really well. So in the early church, where God was moving and people's lives were being transformed, and not only their spiritual lives, but their physical lives as well were being transformed. And the reason that they were being transformed is that those with wealth and influence were selling their possessions, were selling their fields, were selling their houses, and were bringing the money for distribution amongst anybody that had need. They were using their influence for good. So here's our second question. If we are rich and influential, where are we going to spend the money? Not even the money that's left over, but the money that we need to spend on our own on our own well-being. So we have influence even there. We have those decisions to make about where are you going to buy your clothes, or where are you going to do your food shopping, or how are you going to use the influence that comes with wealth to ensure that none of those workers that have worked to bring our harvest in don't go without their wages. James is always a challenge, and maybe this week is a particular challenge, but can you imagine if we all, and I'm including myself in this, if we all stood up to that challenge and actually took what James says seriously, how much of a change could we see, not only in our own communities, not only in our own nation, but maybe across the world. I hope you have a great week. A lot to think about. God bless.